In the dying days of the Third Age, when the ring-bearer had departed Grey Havens and the last ship of the Eldar had sailed beyond the circles of the world, there came a silence to Middle-earth that had not been known since the music of creation itself was sung. Yet in the halls of Rivendell, where Elladan and Elrohir yet dwelt in their father's house, there stirred a whisper of ancient fear. It was Erestor, the counselor, who first spoke of it, his grey eyes troubled as autumn mist. "My lord," said he to the sons of Elrond, "there comes word from the borders of our realm. The birds speak not, the very stones seem mute, and even the Bruinen runs silent in its bed." Elladan, eldest of the twins, rose from his seat beside the fire. Long had he served as keeper of Rivendell in his father's absence, and the weight of years lay heavy upon his brow. "What say the rangers of this silence, Erestor? Surely Aragorn's men have word from the wild lands?" "Nay, my lord, no word has come from Fornost, nor from the Tower Hills, nor even from the Grey Havens itself. It is as though a great hand has fallen upon the world, stilling all voices save those within these protected halls." Elrohir, younger yet no less wise than his brother, spoke then with voice like distant thunder. "In the days of our youth, before the shadow fell heavy upon the world, our fathers spoke to us of songs that were sung ere the world was made, songs of power that could unmake what was wrought, or bind what sought to break free. Tell me, Erestor, do any of the ancient lore masters yet remain in our halls?" The counselor bowed his head. "Few, my lord. Glorfindel departed with the last ship, and many others have passed beyond the circles of the world. Yet there is one, old Galadhil, who keeps the archives beneath the House of Elrond. He remembers much of the elder days, though his mind oft wanders in paths of memory. Seat. Thus it was that the sons of Elrond descended into the deep vaults of Rivendell, where the accumulated wisdom of ages lay preserved in scroll and tome. There they found Galadhil, ancient beyond the measure of even elvish years, his silver hair like starlight, and his eyes dim with the weight of memory. "My lords," whispered the old keeper, "I have waited long for this day. The signs are clear to those who know the ancient ways. The silence comes not from Middle-earth, but from beyond the sea. Something stirs in Valinor itself, something that threatens the very foundations of Arda." He led them deeper still, to a chamber hewn from the living rock, where a single crystal burned with inner light. Upon a pedestal of mithril lay a tome bound in leaves of Melorn, its pages yellow with age, yet still fair to behold. "Behold," said Galadhil, "the chronicle of the undying land, written by Elwing herself, in the days when she dwelt in the Tower of Arendil. Here is told the tale of the last song of Valinor, a music of such power that it was forbidden to be sung, lest it undo the very foundations of the world." Elladan took up the tome with reverent hands, and his eyes widened as he read the ancient script. "Here is written that in the final days, when the circles of the world grow thin and the barriers between the seen and unseen weaken, the last song may be sung by one who has tasted both sorrow and joy beyond measure. But the singer must be one who walks between worlds, neither wholly of Middle-earth nor wholly of the undying lands." "And what power holds this song?" asked Elrohir, though something in his brother's face already told him the answer chilled the heart. "It can remake the music of creation," Galadhil whispered, "or destroy it utterly." In that moment, as if summoned by their words, there came a sound from the upper halls. Not the silence they had known, but something far worse. A discordant note, like the wailing of wind through broken stone, that seemed to pierce the very air and set their hearts to trembling. The three rushed from the archives to find the halls of Rivendell in disarray. The fountain in the courtyard had ceased its singing, the flames in the hearths burned without warmth, and from the western sky there came a light that was not the light of sun or moon or star, but something else, cold and terrible and wrong. "The time has come," said Galadhil, his voice now strong despite his great age. The silence was but the beginning. Now comes the true test, for in the undying lands, someone seeks to sing the last song of Valinor, and if they succeed in their dark purpose, not even the Valar themselves may be able to prevent the unmaking of all that is. Elladan and Elrohir looked upon each other, and in their eyes was the light of decision. They were the sons of Elrond half-elven, bearers of Gil-galad's line, and though their father had sailed beyond the sea, the burden of guardianship now fell to them. "Then we must sail to Valinor ourselves," said Elladan, "for if the last song threatens all of Arda, then all of Arda must unite to prevent it." "But how, brother?" asked Elrohir. "The straight road is closed to all save the ring-bearers and those whom the Valar specifically summon. No ship of Middle-earth has sailed that way for an age of the world." Old Galithil smiled then, and for a moment his eyes held the light of youth. "Not all the secrets of the elder days have passed from memory, my lords. Come, and I shall show you something that has lain hidden in these halls since the days when Gil-galad himself walked among us." Beneath Rivendell, in caverns that delved deeper than even the archives, Galithil led the sons of Elrond along paths that few had trod since the Second Age. The walls here were carved not with the flowing script of elvish lore, but with runes of power that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Here," said the ancient keeper, placing his hand upon a door of mithril that bore no visible lock or handle, "lies the final gift of the shipwright Círdan to your house. Wrought was it in the days when the White Council held power, when hope still burned bright in the hearts of the wise." The door swung open at his touch, revealing a chamber vast beyond imagining. In its center, upon a cradle of silver and gold, lay a ship the like of which had not been seen since the elder days. Her hull was carved from a single pearl of the sea, and her masts were wrought of Malorn wood that gleamed like starlight. Upon her prow was set the figure of an eagle, with wings outspread, and in its talons it bore a crystal that pulsed with the light of Erendil's star. "Behold Alcarinque," said Galithil, using the ancient tongue, "the swan of glittering light. Built was she by the craft of Círdan the shipwright, and blessed by Galadriel herself with the power to sail the straight road. Long has she waited for this hour, when need would be greatest and hope grown thin." Elrohir walked slowly around the vessel, his eyes wide with wonder. But why was such a ship built in secret? Why did not our father speak of her existence? "Because," came a voice from the shadows, "he feared this day would come." The brothers turned to see a figure emerge from the darkness, tall and fair, clad in robes of gray and bearing a staff of ash. Yet this was no wizard of Middle-earth, but one of the Istari who had long been thought lost. "Pallando!" breathed Elladan, recognizing the blue wizard who had vanished into the east in the Second Age. "Long have you been counted among the missing." The blue wizard inclined his head gravely. "Not missing, son of Elrond, but watching. For I was sent to guard against this very peril, the corruption of the last song. Yet I failed in my watching, and now the shadow falls even upon the undying land." "What shadow?" demanded Elrohir. "Who would dare corrupt the music of Valinor itself?" Pallando's eyes grew dark with sorrow. "One who was once counted among the greatest of the Eldar, but whose heart was turned by grief beyond enduring. Daron the minstrel, greatest of all singers save Maglor himself, has awakened from the sleep of ages. Long has he brooded upon the loss of Luthien, whom he loved ere she chose mortality with Beren. Now, in his madness, he seeks to sing the last song and remake the music of creation itself, to bring back those who have passed beyond recall, whatever the cost to all that lives." The silence that followed was profound, for they knew the tale of Daron the minstrel, how he had loved Luthien Tinuvil and lost her to mortal Beren, how he had wandered in madness through the forests of Middle-earth before sailing at last to Valinor in search of peace. That such a one should turn to darkness was a grief beyond measure. "How came you by this knowledge?" asked Elladan. "Through dreams," replied Pallando, "for the Valar themselves are troubled by what stirs in their realm. Manwë has sent visions to all who might aid in this hour, though few remain who can understand their meaning. The last song was placed under ban, not from cruelty, but from necessity. for it holds power to unravel the very threads of fate that bind the world together. Galithil stepped forward then, his ancient face grave. The tale is told in the chronicle that Darin knows but half the song, the portion that can call back what has been lost. But to complete it, to make it whole and stable, he must have the other half, the portion that weaves new patterns in the music. This second half was hidden by Elwing herself, divided into 3 parts and scattered across the world. "And where lie these parts?" asked Elrohir, though something in his heart already guessed the answer. "One lies in the depths of Khazad-dûm, in the Chamber of Light, where the dwarves once wrought their greatest works. Another rests in the halls of Thranduil, woven into the very foundations of the woodland realm, and the third," the old keeper's voice faltered, and it was Pallando who spoke the words that chilled their hearts. "The third lies in Mordor itself, in the ruins of Barad-dûr, where Sauron, in his pride, sought to master all music and song. There it lies still, protected by evil that even the Dark Lord's fall could not destroy." Elladan looked upon his brother, and both knew what must be done. "Then we must gather these fragments before Darin's search discovers them. For if he gains the complete song, he will succeed in his purpose," finished Pallando grimly. "And in bringing back the lost, he will unmake all that lives. The dead will walk again, but the living will pass into shadow, and the world itself will become a realm of memory rather than life." "How long do we have?" asked Elrohir. "The signs say little, but each day the silence spreads further, and with each sunset, the barriers grow thinner. I judge we have until the next dark moon, perhaps a month, by the reckoning of men." Without further words, the sons of Elrond began to prepare for their journey. Weapons they took, and provisions, and such lore books as might aid them in their quest. But most precious of all was a small crystal vial that Galithil pressed into Elladan's hand. "This contains the last light of Arundil's star," he said. "Guard it well, for it alone can guide you along the straight road to Valinor when your mission in Middle-earth is complete." As dawn broke gray and cheerless over Rivendell, Alcarenque was made ready for sailing. Yet this ship was not meant for water, but for the very air itself. For she was wrought with the power to sail between the world, riding upon currents of wind and starlight. "Where first shall we go?" asked Elrohir, as they made ready to depart. "To Khazad-dûm," replied his brother, "for of all our destinations, it lies closest, and perhaps in the ancient halls of Durin's folk we may find aid. For the dwarves were ever masters of crafts that could endure the passage of ages." Pallando raised his staff, and it blazed with blue fire. "I shall come with you as far as the borders of Moria," he said, "for I have some power yet to aid your passage. But know this, once you enter those halls, you go beyond my ability to help. The powers that guard the fragment are ancient and fell, and they know neither mercy nor reason." As the ship rose from her cradle and took to the morning air, Galithil watched from the doorway of his hidden chamber. In his heart was both hope and fear, for he knew that the fate of all the world now rested in the hands of the sons of Elrond. Behind them, Rivendell fell into shadow as the unnatural twilight spread further across Middle-earth. And in the western sky, that cold light grew ever brighter, like a star of malice, watching all their movement. Through the gray morning air sailed Alcarinque, her silver hull gleaming despite the pall that lay upon the world. Swiftly she bore her passengers eastward, over the misty mountains where the peaks stood like ancient sentinels wreathed in mist. Pallando stood at the prow, his blue robes streaming in the wind of their passage, while the sons of Elrond guided their ethereal vessel by arts learned in their father's house. "See there," said the blue wizard, pointing with his staff toward a dark cleft in the mountainside, "the Dimril Gate, where once the dwarves came forth in the glory of their kingdom. Now it stands sealed, and few dare approach those shadowed halls." As they drew nearer to the entrance of Khazad-dûm, the very air seemed to thicken with ancient dread. The mountains themselves appeared to lean inward, as though seeking to bar their passage, and from the depths below came a sound like distant drums, not the drums of war, but of lamentation. Alcarinqua settled upon a shelf of stone before the great gate, her starlight hull dimming as she touched the cursed earth. The doors of Durin stood open, but beyond them lay only impenetrable darkness, as though the very light of day feared to enter those halls. "I can come no further," said Pallando, his face grave. "The ban laid upon the Astari prevents me from entering the realm of the dwarves uninvited. But you, sons of Elrond, carry in your vein the blood of both kindreds. The ancient pacts may yet hold for such as you." Elladan and Elrohir armed themselves with blade and bow, and each bore a crystal of Rivendell that might hold back the darkness. As they approached the threshold, Elladan spoke aloud the traditional greeting of their house. "We are the sons of Elrond Half-Elven, friend to Durin and his heirs. We seek passage through your halls upon an errand of great need." For a long moment, only silence answered them. Then, from the depths of the mountain, came a voice like the grinding of stone upon stone. "Enter, if you dare, sons of the Eldar. But know that the paths of Khazad-dûm lead now to places where neither dwarf nor elf was meant to tread. The Chamber of Light lies beyond the bridge of Khazad-dûm, in the deepest halls where our fathers wrought their greatest works. Yet guardians walk there still, and they know not friend from foe. Into the darkness they passed, their crystals casting pools of silver light that seemed pitifully small against the vast shadows of the mountain. The halls of Moria stretched before them, carved pillars rising into darkness, and everywhere the signs of ancient battle, broken weapons, scattered armor, and upon the walls the scars of fire and claw. "Here fell Balin, son of Fundin," murmured Elrohir as they passed a great tomb wrought of marble. "And here the company of the Ring faced the shadow of flame. The very stones remember their valor." Deeper they went, following passages that seemed to twist and turn without reason, as though the mountain itself sought to confuse their steps. Hours passed, or perhaps days. In that lightless realm, time held no meaning. At length, they came to a great chasm spanned by a bridge of stone so narrow that only one might cross at a time. "The bridge of Khazad-dûm," breathed Elladan. "Here Gandalf the Grey made his stand against the Balrog. The very air still trembles with the memory of that battle." Yet, as they approached the bridge, they saw that their path was barred. Upon the far side stood a figure wrought of shadow and flame. Not the ancient Balrog, for that creature had fallen into the abyss, but something else. A guardian set by powers older than the flame of Udun, shaped like a dwarf, but wrought of living stone and burning coal. "Who seeks passage to the sacred chamber?" the guardian demanded, its voice like the roar of forge fire. "We seek the fragment of the last song," replied Elladan boldly. "The world itself stands in peril, and we must gather the scattered parts ere evil claims them." The stone guardian laughed, a sound like boulders crashing down a mountainside. "Many have come seeking the treasures of the depths. None have passed. The Chamber of Light holds more than song fragments. It contains the very essence of creation, as the dwarves understood it. Would you face the trial of making to claim your prize?" The brothers exchanged glances, knowing they had no choice. "We accept the trial." "Then know this," said the guardian. "In the chamber beyond lies not only what you seek, but 3 tests. You must forge something true, sing something pure, and sacrifice something precious. Fail in any of these, and you will join the stone guardians that walk these halls for all eternity." With that, the creature stepped aside, and the sons of Elrond crossed the narrow bridge into the deepest halls of Khazad-dûm. Here the architecture changed, becoming more ancient and strange. The walls were covered with murals that seemed to move in the flickering light of their crystals, showing scenes of the creation of the world and the first shaping of stone and metal. At last they came to a great door, wrought of mithril and gold, upon which was carved the Tree of the Valor and the 7 stars of Durin's crown. As they approached, the door swung open of its own accord, revealing the Chamber of Light. Never had the sons of Elrond beheld such wonder. The chamber was vast as a cathedral, its walls lined with crystals that held within them the light of sun and moon and stars. In the center stood 7 anvils, each wrought of a different metal, and beside them bellows that breathed with their own life. At the far end, upon a dais of white stone, lay a small crystal that sang with its own music, the first fragment of the last song. Yet between them and their goal stood 3 challenges, marked by ancient runes upon the floor. At the first station lay tools of smithcraft and ingots of precious metals. Here was the trial of making. Elladan approached the forge, feeling the weight of expectation upon him. What could he make that would be deemed true by the ancient powers of this place? Then inspiration came to him. Drawing forth his sword, he began to work the mithril. Not to craft a weapon or ornament, but to forge a simple chain, link by link, each one representing a bond between the peoples of Middle-earth. Dwarf and elf, man and hobbit, all united in common cause against the darkness. As the final link was joined, the chain blazed with inner light, and the first test was passed. The second trial was Elrohir's to face. Here stood a harp of silver wire, and the challenge was to sing something pure. Yet what song could reach the hearts of the stone guardians that watched from the shadows? Then he remembered the lament his father had taught him. The song of Gilgalad's sacrifice, pure in its grief and noble in its purpose. As his voice rose in the ancient melody, the very crystals began to resonate, and tears of light fell from the eyes of the stone guardian. The second test was passed, but the third trial required a sacrifice from both brothers, something precious beyond measure. They looked upon each other, understanding what must be done. Each drew forth a small pendant they had worn since childhood, wrought by their mother Celebrian's own hands before she had sailed into the west. These held their most cherished memories of home and family. Together, they cast the pendants into a flame that burned cold and white upon the altar. The sacrifice was accepted, though it tore their hearts to make it. As the third test was completed, the fragment of the last song rose from its resting place and floated gently into Elladan's outstretched hands. It was warm to the touch and sang with a voice like distant bells, carrying within it the echo of the music of creation itself. But as they prepared to depart, the stone guardian appeared once more. "You have passed the trials," it said, "but know that your presence here has been noted by powers beyond these mountains. The enemy knows you seek the fragment. Beware, for the next fragment lies in lands where the very trees have eyes and ears." As they made their way back through the halls of Moria, the sons of Elrond felt the weight of their quest settling upon them. 2 fragments remained, and already the forces of darkness were stirring to oppose them. From the darkness of Moria, Alcarinque bore the sons of Elrond northward through the gray air toward the great forest that lay beyond the borders of Rovanion. The ship moved swift and silent as a cloud's shadow, yet behind them, watching eyes marked their passage, and in the distance, darker shapes began to stir. "The forest of the Great Fear," said Elladan, as the vast canopy of Mirkwood spread before them. "Though Thranduil's people have driven back the shadows, still the memory of darkness lingers in these woods." Yet as they approached the borders of the woodland realm, they saw that all was not as it should be. The trees stood silent and watchful, their leaves unnaturally still despite the wind that bore their ship. No birds sang in the branches, and the very air seemed thick with suspicion and dread. Pallando, who had remained with them through their flight from Moria, raised his staff and spoke words of power in the ancient tongue. "Something pursues us," he said grimly. "I sense the presence of the 9. The Nazgul have risen again, though they should have passed beyond recall with their master's fall." "But how can this be?" asked Elrohir. "The ring is destroyed, and their power broken. The corruption of the last song spreads backwards through time itself," replied the Blue Wizard. "As Darren seeks to remake what was, the barriers between past and present grow thin. The Nazgul are but shadows now, yet shadows can still bring fear to the hearts of the living." As if summoned by his word, there came from behind them a sound like the wailing of wind through dead trees, and in the gray sky appeared 9 shapes riding upon fell beasts. creatures of shadow and malice that had no place in the waking world. "Make haste to Thranduil's halls," cried Pallando. "The Nazgul cannot enter there, for the king of the woodland realm bears still a ring of power, and his domain is protected by the light of Arundel." Alcarinca dove toward the forest canopy, her hull scraping the topmost branches as they sought refuge beneath the trees. Behind them, the Nazgul shrieked their frustration, but dared not follow into the protected realm. Through the twilight paths they sailed, until at last they came to the great caves where Thranduil held his court. The Elven King's halls were carved from the living rock, their walls adorned with golden light and the music of running water. Guards clad in green and brown challenged their approach, but when they saw the sons of Elrond, they lowered their spears in greeting. "Welcome, kinsmen," said their captain. "Long has it been since visitors came from Rivendell, but our king awaits you. He has had strange dreams of late, and spoke your names ere ever you arrived." Through corridors carved with images of deer and woodland beasts, they were led to the throne room of Thranduil. There sat the Elven King upon a seat of carved wood, his golden hair crowned with a circlet of autumn leaves, his eyes gray as storm clouds and ancient as the forest itself. "Sons of Elrond," he said, his voice like the whisper of wind through branches, "you come in a dark hour. The trees speak of unease, and the very stones beneath my throne sing discord. What brings you to my realm?" Swiftly, Elladan told their tale, the silence, the last song, and their quest to gather the scattered fragments before Daron could claim them. Thranduil listened in silence, his face growing ever more grave. "The fragment you seek lies in the heart chamber," he said at length, "beneath the roots of the greatest Malern tree in my domain. But it is guarded by my own enchantment, woven into the very foundations of this realm. To claim it, you must prove yourselves worthy by the old laws of the woodland realm." "What trial must we face?" asked Elrohir. "The trial of the paths," replied Thranduil. "In the deepest woods of my realm lie 3 paths: the path of memory, the path of dreams, and the path of truth. Each holds dangers that can trap the unwary forever. Yet one among them leads to the heart chamber. Choose wisely, for you may walk only one path, and if you choose amiss, you will wander in the shadows of the forest until the end of days." The Elven King rose from his throne and led them deep into the forest, to a glade where 3 paths diverged beneath an ancient oak. Each path was marked by a standing stone carved with runes of power, and from each came a different sound. One sang with voices of the past, another whispered of things that might be, and the third spoke only truth, however harsh. "Which shall we choose?" asked Elladan, studying the runes upon each stone. Before his brother could answer, there came a new voice from the shadow, ancient and sad, yet touched with madness that chilled the heart. "Choose the path of memory, sons of Elrond, and walk with me through the halls of time." From the twilight beneath the trees stepped a figure that had not been seen in Middle-earth for an age. Tall and fair, clad in robes that seemed woven of starlight, his face noble yet marked by sorrow beyond bearing. In his hands he bore a harp of silver, and about him clung the aura of great power barely held in check. "Daron," breathed Thranduil, his hand moving to the sword at his side. "You were banned from these woods in the elder days. How come you here now?" The minstrel smiled, and in that smile was both beauty and terror. "The bands of old lose their power, Thranduil King, when the foundations of the world shake. I have come for what is mine by right, the fragment of the last song that lies in your keeping." "It shall not be yours," declared Elladan, drawing his blade. "We know your purpose, and we will not let you unmake the world for the sake of your lost love." Daron's laughter was like the sound of silver bells cracking. "My lost love? Nay, sons of Elrond. My purpose is greater than the small griefs of my heart. I would restore all that has been lost. Not just Luthien, but every joy that has passed from the world. The Ents will walk again in their full strength. The dwarves will multiply like stars, and the elves will no longer fade. Is this not a worthy goal?" "At the cost of all that lives now?" demanded Elrohir. "You would make the world a place of memory rather than hope." "Hope?" Darren's eyes flashed with an inner fire. "What hope remains when the music grows ever fainter? When the age of wonder passes into twilight? Better to preserve what was beautiful than to watch it fade into darkness." The minstrel raised his harp and began to play, and at the sound of his music, the very trees began to sway and bend. The path of memory blazed with sudden light, and in its depths could be seen visions of the elder days, Gil-galad in his glory, Elrond and Celebrian in their youth, all the beauty that had passed from the world. "See how fair was the world that is lost," sang Darren. "Come with me, and I will show you wonders beyond imagining." Yet even as the brothers felt the pull of his music, Thranduil stepped forward, raising his own voice in the ancient song of his people. The two melodies clashed like sword upon sword, and the very air rang with their conflict. "Choose quickly," gasped the Elven King, straining against Darren's power. "I cannot hold him long." Elladan looked upon the three paths and saw that this was no mere choice of routes, but a choice of philosophy itself. The path of memory led backward to what was lost. The path of dreams forward to what might be. The path of truth to what simply was, harsh, uncertain, but real. "The path of truth," he said firmly. And together the brothers stepped upon the middle way. Darren shrieked with rage as his power broke against their decision. "Fools, you choose the hardest path of all. Yet I shall have the fragment in the end, for my servants are many, and the shadows themselves obey my will." The minstrel faded back into the twilight, but his laughter echoed long after his form had vanished. The path of truth led downward, into caverns beneath the forest, where the roots of the great trees formed living pillars, and in the heart of this underground realm stood the greatest Malern of all, ancient beyond measure, its silver bark gleaming with inner light. At its base, carved into the living wood, was a chamber that pulsed with the rhythm of the tree's own life. And there, cradled in a nest of golden leaves, lay the second fragment of the last song. Yet as Elrohir reached for it, the tree itself spoke with a voice like the whisper of countless leaves. "The fragment is yours by right of trial, sons of Elrond. Yet know that in taking it, you accept a burden beyond your imagining. For this fragment contains not just music, but the very essence of growth and change. Guard it well, for in wrong hands, it could turn all living things to instruments of its wielder's will." With two fragments of the last song secured, Alcarinque turned southward, through skies grown ever darker. The unnatural twilight now covered half of Middle-earth, and in its gray depths, shapes moved that had no place in the waking world. The Nazgul had grown bolder, ranging far from their shadow steeds to walk among the ruins of ancient battles, and wherever they passed, the very ground grew cold and barren. "We are pursued by more than the Nine," said Palando, as their ship sailed over the desolation of the Dagorlad. "Darren has awakened other evil things that slumbered in the deep places of the world, waiting for the return of their master's voice." Below them, the marshes of the dead glowed with an unholy light, and the faces trapped in their waters gazed upward with eyes full of longing and despair. The war cries of ancient battles echoed from the Mires, growing louder as the barriers between past and present weakened further. "How fares the world beyond these borders?" asked Elladan, his heart heavy with foreboding. "Gondor stands firm," replied the Blue Wizard, "for Aragorn's will is strong, and the white tree blooms still in Minas Tirith. But in the north, strange tales are told. The Shire is wrapped in silence, and no word comes from the rebuilt halls of Dale or Erebor. It is as though the very song of creation grows discordant, and all harmony fails. Ahead of them loomed the Mountains of Shadow, and beyond them the black plain of Gorgoroth, where once the Dark Lord had held dominion. Even now, years after Sauron's fall, the land remained scarred and lifeless, a wound upon the face of Arda that would not heal. "There," said Elrohir, pointing to a jagged peak that clawed at the gray sky. "Mount Doom, where the ring was unmade, and beyond it." His voice trailed off, as they beheld the ruins of Barad-dûr. The Dark Tower had fallen when its master's power was broken, yet something of its malice remained. Its broken stones lay scattered across the plain, like the bones of some vast dragon, yet they pulsed with a faint red light, as though the fires of creation still burned within them. "The third fragment lies there," said Pallando grimly, "in the Chamber of Echoes, deep beneath the tower's ruins." Sauron sought to master all music and song, to bend them to his will as he did with the Rings of Power. The fragment became corrupted by his touch, and now it sings not of creation, but of domination. As Alcarinca descended toward the ruins, the very air grew thick with malice. The stones of Barad-dûr seemed to watch their approach, and from the cracks between them seeped a darkness that was more than mere absence of light. It was despair made manifest, the echo of all the torment that had been wrought in this accursed place. "We cannot land here," said Elladan, feeling the ship shudder as evil pressed against her hull. "The corruption is too strong." "Nay," replied Pallando, "but there is another way." In the days of the siege of Barad-dûr, Gil-galad and Elendil discovered secret passages that led to the tower's heart. Some of these may yet remain, hidden from the Dark Lord's sight, even in his greatest power. The blue wizard raised his staff, and it blazed with silver fire that cut through the oppressive gloom. Following the light's guidance, they found a crevice in the mountainside, where ancient stonework could still be discerned, the remnant of a tunnel carved by the smiths of Numenor. Into this passage they descended, leaving Alcarinca hidden among the rocks above. The tunnel was narrow and treacherous, filled with rubble from the tower's fall, yet it led ever downward toward the foundations of Sauron's stronghold. Hours passed in that lightless place, where the very walls seemed to whisper of old malice. At length they emerged into a vast chamber hewn from the living rock, the Chamber of Echoes, where once the Dark Lord had practiced his corruptions of the music of creation. The chamber was filled with instruments of torment, harps strung with silver wire that sang of sorrow, drums that beat with the rhythm of breaking hearts, and bells that tolled for hopes destroyed. In the center of this awful orchestra stood a throne of black iron, and upon it sat a figure that should not have been. It was Sauron himself, or what remained of him. Not the Dark Lord in his power, but a shadow of malice given form by the corruption of the last song. His body was wrought of smoke and hatred, his eyes 2 points of flame that burned with undying rage. "So," the shadow Sauron spoke, his voice like the grinding of broken stone, "the sons of Elrond come at last to my domain. You seek the fragment of the last song, but you shall find only death and despair. You are defeated," declared Elrohir boldly. "Your ring is destroyed, your power broken. You are but an echo of evil, given form by corruption." The shadow laughed, a sound like the collapse of mountains. "I am more than echo, son of half-elven. I am possibility, the chance that evil might return, that darkness might triumph after all. And with each note of the corrupted song, I grow stronger." From the walls of the chamber stepped forms that chilled the heart, the shadows of all who had served the Dark Lord, given substance by his malice. Orcs and trolls, fell beasts and Nazgûl, all the hosts of Mordor reborn in shadow form. "The fragment lies there," said Pallando, pointing to an altar of black stone behind the throne. "But to reach it, we must pass through all the evil that Sauron ever wrought." The battle that followed was terrible beyond description. The sons of Elrond fought with blade and bow against enemies that were more than mere flesh. They battled the very essence of malice itself. Their elvish steel burned with starlight as it clove through shadow flesh. Yet for every foe they struck down, 2 more arose to take its place. Pallando stood in their midst, his staff blazing like a beacon as he chanted words of power in the ancient tongue. Yet even his might was pressed to its limit by the accumulated evil of this place. "I cannot hold them much longer," he gasped. "You must reach the fragment quickly, ere we are overwhelmed." Elladan looked upon the altar where the third fragment lay, pulsing with corrupted light. Yet between them and their goal stood Shadow Sauron himself, grown vast and terrible as he fed upon the dark harmonies of his chamber. "Brother," said Elladan to Elrohir, "we must trust in the light we carry. The fragments we have gathered, perhaps together, they have power to cleanse this corruption." Drawing forth the crystal containers that held the first two fragments, the brothers spoke words of awakening their father had taught them in childhood. The fragments responded, blazing with pure light that drove back the shadows and caused Shadow Sauron to shriek in agony. In that moment of respite, Elrohir leaped forward and grasped the third fragment. As his hand closed upon it, the corrupted music that filled the chamber changed. The notes of domination became notes of sorrow, and the shadows began to weep for the evil they had done. "It is not corrupted," gasped Elrohir in wonder. "It only seemed so because of where it lay. The fragment itself remains pure. It sings of redemption and the hope that even the fallen might find forgiveness." As the truth of the fragment's nature became clear, Shadow Sauron began to fade, his form becoming ever more insubstantial. "No," he whispered, his voice growing faint. "I am possibility. I am the chance of return." "You are fear," replied Elladan firmly. "Fear that evil might triumph, that darkness might return. But fear has no power over those who choose hope." With that, the shadow dispersed like mist before the morning sun, and the chamber of echoes fell silent. The instruments of torment crumbled to dust, and from the walls came the sound of weeping, not of despair, but of release. As all the pain imprisoned in this place was finally allowed to pass away. "The three fragments are gathered," said Pallando, his face grave despite their victory. "Yet now comes the hardest part of our quest. We must sail to Valinor itself, to the undying lands where Daron seeks to complete his dark song." As they made their way back through the tunnel to where Alcarinki waited, the brothers felt the weight of destiny upon them. Behind them, the ruins of Barad-dûr began to collapse entirely, as though the removal of the fragment had taken away the last vestige of power that held the broken stones together. "How shall we find Daron in the vastness of Valinor?" asked Elrohir as their ship rose into the gray sky. "The fragments themselves will guide us," replied Pallando, "for they are drawn to their source, and Daron's partial song calls to them like a lodestone draws iron. But know this, once we pass beyond the circles of the world, we enter a realm where the very laws of existence are different. The Valar themselves may oppose us, for they guard the peace of the undying lands jealously. Then we must hope that they will understand our purpose," said Elladan, "for if Daron succeeds in his design, not even Valinor will escape the unmaking." As Alcarinka turned westward toward the distant sea, the sons of Elrond looked back upon Middle-earth one last time. The silence had spread far now, covering all the lands they had known and loved. Only in the direction of their flight did any light remain, the light of Arundil's star, guiding them toward the undying lands and whatever fate awaited them there. Westward flew Alcarinque through skies that grew ever stranger as they approached the borders of the mortal world. The gray twilight that had covered Middle-earth began to lift, replaced by lights that had no earthly source. Aurora borealis that danced in colors unknown to mortal eyes, and stars that sang with voices audible to the ear. "We approach the straight road," said Pallando, his face lit by the otherworldly radiance, "the path that leads from the circles of the world to the undying land. Here the laws of Arda Mard give way to the music of Arda Healed, and what was sundered in the beginning becomes whole once more." Below them, the great sea stretched to the horizon, its waters no longer the blue-gray of mortal oceans, but silver and gold, reflecting lights that came from beyond the world. Schools of fish swam in its depths, yet these were not common fish, but the forms of stars given aquatic shape, their scales gleaming like captured constellations. As they sailed onward, the very air began to change. It grew lighter, sweeter, filled with scents of flowers that bloomed in the undying lands. Elenor and Nifredil, and others that had no names in the tongues of Middle-earth. The ship herself seemed to respond to these changes, her hull growing brighter, her sails billowing with winds that came from the very music of creation. "Look there," breathed Elrohir, pointing ahead to where a line of light stretched across the horizon, the shores of Valinor. Yet, as they drew nearer to the undying lands, they saw that all was not as it should be. The light that should have blazed eternal from those blessed shores flickered and dimmed, as though some shadow had fallen across the realm of the Valar. The very air grew heavy with discord, and from the direction of the mountains they could hear a sound that chilled their hearts. The voice of Daran raised in the partial, last song. "He has begun," said Pallando grimly. "Each note he sings weakens the barriers between what is and what was. See how the past bleeds through into the present." Indeed, as they watched, ghostly figures began to appear upon the shores of Valinor, the shades of elves who had passed beyond recall, walking once more in the forms they had worn in life. Yet these were not living beings returned, but echoes of memory given substance, and in their eyes was only emptiness and loss. "The Valar," said Elladan. "Where are the guardians of the West? Surely they would not permit such corruption of their realm." "There," replied Pallando, pointing to the distant peaks of the Pelori. "Do you see the lights that burn upon the mountaintops? The Valar are gathered in council, seeking to contain the damage that Daran's song inflicts. Yet they dare not act directly, for to use their full power against him might complete the unmaking he has begun." As Alcarinque approached the harbors of Valinor, they were met by ships of the Eldar, vessels of such beauty that mortal eyes could scarce comprehend them, wrought of materials that existed only in the undying lands. From the largest of these ships came a voice that they knew well. "My sons." Upon the prow stood Elrond himself, clad in robes of starlight, his face bearing the weight of endless years, yet bright with the joy of reunion. Behind him stood others of the White Council, Galadriel in her silver robes, Círdan the shipwright, with his beard like foam upon the sea, and others who had passed beyond the circles of the world. "Father," said Elladan and Elrohir together, their hearts lifting despite the peril that surrounded them. "You have done well to come this far," said Elrond, as their ships drew alongside each other. "The fragments you bear are the key to stopping Daran's madness, yet the path ahead is fraught with greater peril than any you have yet faced." "Where is the minstrel?" asked Elladan. "We can hear his song, but cannot see its source." Galadriel answered, her voice like the whisper of wind through leaves of gold. "He stands upon Taniqatil itself, the highest peak of the Pelori, where once Manwë held his throne. From there his voice carries to all corners of Valinor, and with each note he sings, more of the past bleeds into the present." "Why do the Valar not stop him?" demanded Elrohir. "Because," said Círdan sadly, "he has woven himself into the very structure of the last song. To strike him down might complete the work he has begun, unmaking all of creation in a single catastrophic discord. Only another voice, singing the true and complete song, can counter his corrupted version." Elrond looked upon his sons with eyes that held both pride and sorrow. "That is why you have come. The blood of Luthien flows in your vein, she who once sang to still the evil of Morgoth himself. You alone among all the children of Ilúvatar have the heritage to sing the complete last song and restore the music to its proper harmony." "But we know not the words," protested Elladan. "The song was forbidden, its verses scattered and hidden. The fragments themselves will teach you," said Galadriel. "When brought together in the presence of the original song, they will resonate with the true music and reveal the words that must be sung. Yet know this, to sing the last song is to risk everything. It may preserve creation, or it may complete its unmaking." Pallando, who had listened in silence, now spoke with urgency. "Time grows short. Each moment Daran continues his song, the damage spreads further. Already the barriers between the music and the void weaken. We must reach Taniqatil before he completes his work." As if summoned by his words, the sea around them began to churn and foam. From its depths arose shapes of terror, the watchers in the water given new form, and behind them, things that had no names, creatures from the void that sought to enter creation through the cracks that Darren's song had made. "The void spawn," gasped Círdan. "They sense the weakening of reality's foundations. If they break through in force, not even the complete last song may be able to restore what they devour." The battle that followed was unlike any fought since the Elder Days. Ships of light clashed with creatures of absolute darkness upon waters that reflected both the glory of creation and the hunger of the void. The Eldar fought with weapons that blazed like stars, while their enemies struck with claws that could rend the very fabric of existence. In the midst of the battle, Alcarinque soared upward, bearing the sons of Elrond toward the peaks of Valinor. Behind them, their kinfolk held the line against the void spawn, buying time for the crucial confrontation that must come. "There!" cried Elrohir, pointing to a figure that stood upon the highest peak, silhouetted against the strange aurora that now filled the sky of Valinor. "Daron, the minstrel!" Even at this distance, they could see that the corruption of his song had changed him. No longer did he appear as the fair elf who had loved Luthien in the youth of the world. Now he was wreathed in shadows of his own making, his form shifting between what he had been and what his grief had made him. As they approached Taniqatil, the very mountain seemed to resist their passage. Winds rose that sought to dash them against the rocks, and the peak itself groaned and trembled as though in pain. Yet Alcarinque pressed onward, her hull blazing with the light of Arundil's star. At last, they reached the summit, where once the throne of Manwë had stood in majesty. Now that sacred place was transformed into something altogether different, a dais of shadow and sorrow, where Daron stood with arms outstretched, his voice raised in the terrible beauty of the last song's first half. And as they beheld him there, wreathed in the power of his music, the sons of Elrond understood at last the true magnitude of their task. For this was not merely a battle between good and evil, but a choice between the world that was and the world that might be, between the beauty of memory and the hope of tomorrow. Upon the wind-swept peak of Taniqatil, where the very air sang with the power of creation, Daron the minstrel stood in terrible majesty. His form was no longer wholly that of an elf. The corruption of his song had wreathed him in shadows of grief and longing, and his eyes burned with the fire of one who had gazed too long into the abyss of loss. Before him stretched a harp of impossible size, its strings wrought from the light of stars themselves. As his fingers moved upon those strings, reality rippled and changed around him. The past bled through into the present. Ghostly towers of Gondolin rose and fell in moments. The shadows of the two trees flickered, where now no light should be, and across the slopes of the mountain walked the shades of all who had passed beyond recall. "Daron," called Elladan as Alcarinque settled upon the peak, "end this madness. You have already torn great wounds in the fabric of creation." The minstrel turned, and his face was both beautiful and terrible to behold. In his features they could see the elf he had once been, noble and fair, with the light of Valinor upon his brow. Yet shadow lay beneath that light, and in his eyes was a grief that had transcended reason. "Sons of Elrond," he said, his voice carrying harmonies that tugged at the very soul, "you come too late to stop what has already begun. Behold, the lost ones return. See how Luthien walks again among the flowers of Valinor." Indeed, upon the mountainside there moved a figure of such beauty that it pierced the heart to look upon her. Luthien Tinuvil, fairest of all the children of Ilúvatar, dancing as she had in the woods of Doriath long ago. Yet as the brothers watched, they saw that this was but a shadow, a memory given form. Her eyes held no recognition, no spark of true life. "That is not Luthien," said Elrohir firmly. "It is but an echo of what was, a phantom summoned by your grief." Daron's laughter was like the sound of breaking crystal. What matter if she be echo or substance, so long as she exists? I have found the power to bring back all that was lost. The glory of Numenor, the majesty of Gondolin, the might of the Noldor in their prime. Is this not worth any price? The price is the world itself, replied Eladan. You would sacrifice all that lives for the sake of what is gone. This is not love, but obsession. Love? The minstrel's eyes flashed with terrible fire. What know you of love, you who have never lost beyond all hope of return? I loved her ere the sun first rose. I sang for her in the halls of Thingol, and I watched as she chose mortality and faded from the world. For age upon age I have mourned her passing, and now at last I have found the power to restore what was taken. As he spoke, his fingers moved upon the star-strung harp, and the partial last song swelled in power. More shades appeared upon the mountain, Gil-galad in his armor of silver, Isildur bearing the broken sword, even Beren himself, walking hand in hand with the phantom Luthien. Yet all were empty shell, lacking the fire of true life. These are not the ones you loved, said a new voice, and from the shadows stepped a figure that had not been seen in Middle-earth for long ages. It was Luthien herself, not the phantom Darin had summoned, but her true spirit, permitted by the mercy of Eru to manifest in this crucial hour. Beloved, whispered Darin, his voice breaking with joy and wonder, you have come back to me at last. But Luthien shook her head, her face filled with infinite sadness. I have not returned, dear friend. I am permitted this brief manifestation only to show you the truth you refuse to see. The phantoms you have created are not us. They are prisons for the memories of the dead, denying them the peace they have earned. No, Darin cried, his song growing wilder and more discordant. I will not let you go again. I will sing you back into full existence, whatever the cost. The cost is the destruction of all that is, Luthien replied. Do you think I could find happiness in a world bought with such suffering? Do you think Beren could love a restoration purchased with the lives of all who yet live? For a moment, Darin's song faltered and hope kindled in the hearts of all who watched. But then his grief overwhelmed his reason once more, and he struck the harp with such force that cracks appeared in the very air around them. I care not for the price, he declared. Let the world burn, if it means you live again. At these words, the three fragments of the last song that the brothers carried began to resonate in harmony, their pure notes cutting through the discord of Daron's corruption. The minstrel felt their power, and his eyes widened in sudden understanding. The complete song, he breathed. You carry the lost verses. Give them to me, and I can finish what I have begun. Never, declared Eladan, drawing his sword. We will not permit you to unmake creation for the sake of your obsession. Then you force me to take them, Daron replied, and his song changed, becoming a melody of command and compulsion. The very air around the brothers grew thick and heavy, pressing down upon them with irresistible force. Yet as the minstrel's power sought to overwhelm them, the fragments in their keeping blazed with sudden light. The first fragment, taken from the Chamber of Light in Khazad-dûm, sang of creation and the joy of making. The second, from the halls of Thranduil, harmonized with notes of growth and change. And the third, cleansed in the ruins of Barad-dûr, added its voice with melodies of redemption and hope. Together, these three pure notes formed a barrier that Daron's corrupted song could not penetrate. But more than that, they began to teach the brothers the words and music of the complete last song, filling their minds with knowledge that had been forbidden since the foundation of the world. Now, said Luthien, her form beginning to fade as her permitted time grew short, sing the true song and restore the music to its proper harmony. But remember, the last song has power to remake or unmake. Let your hearts be filled with love for all that lives, not grief for what is lost. With her final words, Luthien's spirit departed, leaving only the echo of her smile to comfort those who remained. Darin cried out in anguish, his song becoming a wail of pure grief that shook the very foundations of the mountain. Eladan and Elrohir looked upon each other, feeling the weight of destiny upon their shoulders. In their minds, the complete last song burned like fire, its words and melodies more beautiful and terrible than anything they had ever imagined. To sing it would be to risk everything, their own existence, the stability of creation itself, the very future of Arda. Yet they had no choice. Already cracks were spreading through the air around them as Darren's grief-maddened song tore holes in reality itself. Through these cracks, they could see the hungry void beyond, waiting to devour all that had been made. "Together, brother," said Eladan, and their voices rose in unison, beginning the first notes of the true and complete last song of Valinor. The music that poured forth was beyond all description. It contained within it the echo of the original music of creation, the harmonies that had shaped the world in the beginning. As they sang, the phantoms summoned by Darren's grief began to fade, not into nothingness, but into peace, their memories honored, but their rest restored. Darren fought against their song with all his power, his discordant melody clashing against their harmony like storm waves against an unyielding shore. The battle of songs shook Taniqatil to its roots and sent tremors through all of Valinor. Yet slowly, inexorably, the true song began to prevail. The cracks in reality sealed themselves. The void spawn were thrust back into the darkness beyond creation, and across all the world, the unnatural silence began to lift. But the greatest change was in Darren himself. As the pure notes of the last song washed over him, the shadows of grief that had consumed him began to dissipate. The madness left his eyes, replaced by recognition of what he had almost wrought. "What have I done?" he whispered, his own song faltering into silence. "In my grief, I nearly unmade all that Eru created. Yet you did not succeed," said Elrohir gently, as their own song drew to its close. "The world endures, and in enduring, it honors the memory of those who have passed beyond." As the last notes of the last song faded into silence, a new sound arose, not the artificial silence that had threatened creation, but the natural quiet of a world at peace. Birds began to sing again in Middle-earth, the sea resumed its eternal rhythm, and in the halls of Valinor, the Valar themselves emerged from their council to survey what had been preserved. Manwë himself appeared upon Taniqatil, his form shining like wind and starlight. With him came the other Valar, Varda, the Star Queen, Ulmo, Lord of Waters, and Aula, the Smith. Their faces bore both sorrow for what had been risked and joy for what had been saved. "It is finished," said Manwë, his voice like the music of the wind itself. "The last song has been sung, and the music of creation is whole once more. Daeron the minstrel, your grief is understood, but your actions cannot be forgotten. What is your will? To remain in Valinor under close guard, or to return to Middle-earth and there find what peace you may?" Darren bowed his head, the weight of his crimes heavy upon his shoulders. "I would return to Middle-earth, my lord, if such mercy is granted. There perhaps I may find some way to atone for the harm I have caused." "It shall be as you wish," Manwë replied. "Yet know that you shall be watched, and if ever again you seek to tamper with the foundations of creation, no mercy shall be shown." With that pronouncement, the immediate crisis was ended. Yet, as the sons of Elrond looked out over the restored beauty of Valinor, they sensed that their adventure was far from over. For in singing the last song, they had gained knowledge that few had ever possessed. And with that knowledge came both great power and great responsibility. In the great hall of Valinor, beneath the dome of stars that Varda herself had kindled, the Valar gathered in council as they had not done since the making of the world. The hall was vast beyond mortal comprehension, its walls wrought of materials that existed only in the undying land, stones that sang with their own music, pillars carved from crystallized starlight, and a floor that reflected not the present moment, but glimpses of all times that had been and might yet be. Upon 14 thrones sat the powers of Arda, their forms terrible and beautiful to behold. At their head sat Manwë, clothed in the winds of heaven, his eyes like blue flame that could see to the farthest corners of creation. Beside him was Varda Elentari, the Star Queen, her robes woven from the light of the first stars, and in her hand she bore a crystal that held within it the echo of the original music. The sons of Elrond stood before this august assembly, still bearing the fragments of the last song that had saved creation itself. Around them gathered others who had played their part in the great crisis. Elrond their father, Galadriel the wise, Círdan the shipwright, and even Pallando the blue wizard, who had laid aside his earthly form to reveal the Maya spirit beneath. Sons of Elrond half-elven, Otio, spoke Manwë, his voice like the sound of wind through high places. You have done a great service to all creation. The last song, which was forbidden for its power to unmake as well as make, has been sung with wisdom and restraint. Yet in gaining this knowledge, you have become something more than you were before. Aula the smith, his massive form wreathed in flames of gold and silver, leaned forward upon his throne. They have become the keepers of the song, he said, his voice like the ringing of hammers upon the anvils of creation. Never again can the complete last song be gathered, save through their willing aid. This is both gift and burden, for they alone now possess the power to preserve or destroy all that exists. Elladan and Elrohir felt the weight of this pronouncement settle upon their shoulders like a mantle of lead. To be the guardians of such power was a responsibility that dwarfed any burden they had known before. "What would you have us do with this knowledge?" asked Elladan. "How can we bear such responsibility without falling into the same obsession that corrupted Daron?" It was Nienna the Weeper who answered, her voice filled with the sorrow and wisdom of one who had witnessed all the griefs of the world. "By remembering always that the greatest power is in restraint, not in action. The last song must never be sung again unless creation itself faces utter destruction. Guard this knowledge well, but guard also your hearts against the temptation to use it for lesser purposes." Yavanna, the giver of fruits, spoke next, her form like a great tree whose leaves rustled with the voices of all growing things. "Yet there is another matter that must be addressed. The singing of the last song has changed more than you might know. The barriers between the worlds have been strengthened, yes, but they have also been clarified. New paths have opened, new possibilities revealed." She gestured, and the floor of the hall showed visions of Middle-earth as it now appeared. The unnatural silence had lifted, but in its place had come changes both subtle and profound. The elven realms bloomed with renewed vigor, as though touched by a blessing from the undying land. In the Shire, the hobbits went about their daily tasks with an added spring in their step, though they knew not why. Even in the dark places of the world, the remnants of Mordor, the haunted paths of Mirkwood, new growth began to show. "The song has healed old wound," explained Varda, her starlight eyes reflecting depths of knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. "Not by bringing back what was lost, as Daron sought to do, but by allowing what remains to flourish more fully. This is the true purpose of the last song, not to remake, but to perfect." Oroma the hunter, his horn gleaming at his side, stood from his throne. Yet there is a price for this healing. The straight road to Valinor, which has been closed to all save the ring-bearers and those specially summoned, must now be opened wider. For the barriers between the world, in being strengthened, have also become more permeable to those with the wisdom to find them. "What does this mean?" asked Elrohir, though his heart already guessed the answer. Ulmo, Lord of Waters, spoke from his throne that seemed wrought of sea foam and storm cloud. "It means that the time of separation draws to an end. Soon, perhaps within a generation by the reckoning of men, the undying lands will no longer be hidden from Middle-earth. The world will be whole once more, as it was in the beginning." The implications of this revelation struck the assembled company like a thunderbolt. For 3 ages of the world, the undying lands had been separated from Middle-earth, accessible only to the Eldar and those few mortals who had earned special grace. Now, that separation was coming to an end. "But the world is not ready," protested Galadriel. "Men have grown proud in their power, and many have forgotten the old wisdom. How will they react when they learn that the undying lands lie just beyond the western horizon?" Mando, judge of the dead, spoke for the first time, his voice like the sound of great doors closing. "They will react as all mortals do when faced with wonder beyond their understanding, some with awe and reverence, others with fear and hatred, and still others with the desire to possess what they cannot comprehend. It will be a time of great testing for all the peoples of Middle-earth." Manwë raised his hand, and silence fell upon the assembly. This is why the sons of Elrond must return to Middle-earth, bearing with them not only the knowledge of the last song, but also the wisdom to guide their people through the changes that are coming. They must prepare both elf and man for the reunification of the world. "And what of Daron?" asked Elrond. "What role will he play in these coming times?" The Valar exchanged glances, and it was clear that this question had been much debated among them. Finally, Manwë spoke. "Daron the minstrel will return to Middle-earth, as he has requested, but he will not go unchanged. His experience with the corrupted song has taught him much about the dangers of obsession and the true nature of love. We hope that he may yet find redemption service to the very creation he nearly destroyed. He will be watched," added Varda sternly. "Should he ever again attempt to tamper with the foundations of reality, he will be brought back to Valinor in chains of adamant." The council continued through many hours, as the Valar spoke of the changes that would come to the world and the preparations that must be made. They told of signs that would herald the reunification, new stars appearing in the sky, strange tides that carried messages from distant shores, and dreams that would come to the wise, showing them visions of the undying lands. "Yet there is one matter more," said Manwë, as the council drew toward its close. "The singing of the last song has awakened something that has slumbered since the foundation of the world. In the deep places of Arda, older even than the Valar, there stirs a power that we had thought bound forever." A chill settled upon the assembly at these words, for the Valar seldom spoke of things that troubled them deeply. "What power is this?" asked Elladan, though he feared to hear the answer. It was Auli who replied, his face grave with ancient memory. "In the beginning, when Eru spoke the world into existence through the music of creation, there were those among the Ainur who refused to take part in the song. They were not evil, as Melkor became, but neither were they good. They simply were not. They chose to remain outside creation, watching but not participating. The Watchers Beyond," whispered Palando, his Miar nature allowing him to remember what others had forgotten. "I had thought them but legend." "No legend," said Varda grimly. "They have watched and waited since the beginning, seeking a way to enter creation without submitting to its laws. The last song, in its power to remake the very foundations of reality, has given them that opportunity. Even now they gather at the borders of existence, probing for weaknesses they might exploit. The implications of this revelation were staggering. The Watchers Beyond were not evil in the way that Morgoth or Sauron had been evil. They were something far more alien and incomprehensible. They represented the void that existed before creation, the null space that had been displaced when Eru spoke the world into being. "What will they do if they succeed in entering creation?" asked Elrohir. "They will not destroy it," replied Manwë. "That would be too simple, too comprehensible. Instead, they will change it, remake it according to principles that have nothing to do with the music of creation. The result would be a world that could not sustain life as we understand it. Not dead, but utterly alien. Then we must stop them," declared Elladan. "If the last song has given them this opportunity, perhaps the last song can close it again." "Perhaps," agreed Nienna, "but to sing the last song again so soon after the first performance would be incredibly dangerous. The very fabric of reality is still settling from the changes you have already wrought. Another performance might tear holes that could never be mended." Ulmo leaned forward on his throne, his voice like the crash of waves upon distant shores. "There is another way. The Watchers Beyond seek to enter creation through the cracks that exist at the boundaries between the mortal world and the undying lands. If those boundaries were strengthened, not by separation, as they have been, but by a different kind of unity, the Watchers might be held at bay. "What kind of unity?" asked Galadriel. "The kind that can only be achieved by bringing the wisdom of Valinor fully into Middle-earth," replied Varda. "Not through conquest or dominion, but through teaching and guidance. The peoples of Middle-earth must be prepared not just for the reunification of the world, but for the cosmic responsibilities that come with it." Mando spoke again, his voice heavy with the weight of fate. "The sons of Elrond must return to Middle-earth immediately. They must gather the wise and the brave, and begin the great work of preparation. For the signs indicate that the Watchers beyond will make their attempt within 7 years of mortal time." 7 years, breathed Elrond. "So little time to prepare an entire world for such a responsibility." "It will have to be enough," said Manwë firmly, "for the alternative is the transformation of all creation into something utterly alien to everything we hold dear." As the council came to its end, the Valar bestowed upon the sons of Elrond certain gifts to aid them in their mission. From Aule came weapons that could wound even incorporeal being. From Yavanna came seeds that would grow into trees of power, anchoring points of wisdom and strength throughout Middle-earth. From Varda came crystals that held the light of the first stars, capable of revealing truth and dispelling deception. Most precious of all was the gift from Manwë himself, a horn of warning, wrought from silver and mithril, whose call could be heard across all the lands of Middle-earth when the final crisis came. "Use it wisely," the Elder King warned, "for when its call is sounded, all who hear it will know that the fate of creation itself hangs in the balance." As the sons of Elrond prepared to depart Valinor, they were joined by an unexpected companion. Darin the minstrel approached them, his form now free of the shadows that had wreathed him during his madness. "I would ask leave to accompany you," he said humbly. "I have much to atone for, and perhaps in the work of preparation I may find some measure of redemption." Elladan looked upon the minstrel with eyes that held both wariness and compassion. "The choice is yours to make, Darin, but know that if you come with us, you will be watched closely. Too much depends upon our mission for us to risk another betrayal." "I understand," replied Darin, "and I accept whatever supervision you deem necessary. My madness is ended, and with it, my selfish obsession with the past. If I can help preserve the future, then perhaps some good may come from all the harm I have caused." Thus it was that 4 figures prepared to depart the undying lands aboard Alcarinque, the sons of Elrond bearing the knowledge of the last song, and Darin the minstrel seeking redemption through service. Behind them, the Valar watched with eyes that could see across the years, knowing that upon these 4 might depend the fate of all creation. As their ship rose into the strange aurora that filled the sky of Valinor, they looked back one last time upon the undying land. The beauty they saw there was beyond description. Towers of crystal and silver, gardens where flowers bloomed in colors that had no name, mountains whose peaks touched the very foundations of heaven. Yet they knew they might never see it again, for the mission that lay before them was fraught with perils beyond imagining, and success was far from certain. The Watchers beyond were patient beyond measure, and cunning beyond mortal comprehension. To defeat them would require all the wisdom and courage that the children of Eru could muster. "Are you ready, brother?" asked Elrohir, as Alcarinque began her long flight back to Middle-earth. "As ready as one can be for the impossible," replied Elladan. "But we do not go alone. The wisdom of the Valar goes with us, and the hope of all creation rests in our hand." Behind them, Darin took up his harp and began to play, not the corrupted song that had nearly unmade the world, but a simple melody of hope and renewal. As the music filled the air around their ship, the sons of Elrond felt their spirits lift, despite the magnitude of their task. They were returning to Middle-earth not as they had left it, as princes of a fading realm, but as guardians of all creation, bearing knowledge and power that could preserve or destroy the world. The greatest adventure of their lives was about to begin. 7 days they sailed through the strange waters that lay between the undying lands and Middle-earth, and with each league they traveled, the sky grew darker and more troubled. What had been aurora borealis in the realm of the Valar became storm clouds heavy with unnatural lightning, and in the depths of those clouds moved shapes that hurt the eyes to look upon. "The watchers beyond grow bolder," said Daron, his fingers still upon his harp strings, but his music grown subdued. They test the boundaries of creation, seeking the weak points where they might break through. As they approached the Grey Havens, they saw that the port was in chaos. Ships that had been moored safely for years now strained at their anchor chain, and the harbor waters churned with an unnatural tide that seemed to flow in directions that defied the laws of nature. Círdan the shipwright awaited them at the quayside, his ancient face etched with new lines of worry. "Welcome back to Middle-earth," he said grimly, "though I fear you return to a world much changed from the one you left." "What news?" asked Elladan, as they disembarked from Alcarinque. "Dark tidings from all quarters," replied the shipwright. "In Gondor, Aragorn fights against unrest among his people. Some have had dreams of a land beyond the Western Sea, and they demand he lead them there by force of arm. In Rohan, the horses grow restless and shy, refusing to cross running water. Even in the Shire, the hobbits speak of strange lights in the sky and voices that call to them in the night." "And the elves?" asked Elrohir. "Ah, there lies the strangest news of all. Those who remained in Middle-earth after the departure of the ring-bearers find themselves changing, not fading, as we have done for so many years, but growing stronger, more vital. Yet with this strength comes a burden. They see farther and hear more clearly than ever before, and what they perceive fills them with unease." Círdan led them along paths that wound between the white towers of the havens, speaking as they walked of the changes that had come to the world. 3 days passed. A ship arrived from the south, men of Umbar who spoke of islands that had never been seen before, rising from the depths of the sea. And from the east come tales of a great aurora that lights the sky above Rhûn, visible even in the brightest daylight. "The barriers weaken," murmured Daron. "The undying lands draw closer to Middle-earth with each passing day." They came at last to a chamber high in the tallest tower of the haven, where maps and charts covered every available surface. Yet these were not ordinary maps. They showed not just the lands and seas of Middle-earth, but the currents of power that flowed beneath the surface of the world. "Behold," said Círdan, pointing to lines of force that pulsed with their own light upon the charts. "The patterns that have held stable since the Third Age now shift and change. Where once there were barriers, now there are bridges. Where once there were separate realms, now there is convergence." Elladan studied the maps with growing alarm. The lines of power that had once flowed in orderly patterns now twisted and writhed like living things. At certain points, dark nodes scattered across Middle-earth. The lines seemed to tangle and knot, creating whirlpools of chaotic energy. "These nodes," he said, pointing to the dark spots. "What are they?" "Places where the old wounds of the world still fester," replied Círdan. "Utumno, where Morgoth first delved his fortress, the ruins of Angband in the far north, Mount Doom, though it has been cleansed, and others, battlefields where great evil was done, places where the song of creation was distorted by malice and hatred. The Watchers beyond will try to enter through these weak points," said Elrohir with sudden understanding. "They cannot breach the barriers where creation is strong and harmonious, but where discord has left scars upon the world." "Exactly," confirmed Daron. "And once they establish even a single foothold in creation, they will begin to change it from within. The transformation will spread like a plague, remaking everything according to their alien nature." Círdan unrolled another chart, this one showing the entire expanse of Middle-earth, from the Grey Havens to the Sea of Rhûn. "I have sent word to all the free people calling them to council. If we are to defend creation itself, we must unite as never before. Not just elves and men and dwarves, but all who would preserve the world as Eru made it. "Where shall this council be held?" asked Eladan. "In the one place where all roads meet," replied Círdan. "Rivendell, your father's house still stands as a beacon of wisdom and peace, and its protections are strong enough to shield our deliberations from unfriendly eyes." As they prepared to depart the Grey Havens, a commotion arose in the harbor below. Looking down from their tower window, they saw a ship unlike any that had sailed the western sea. Its hull was black as midnight, yet it reflected starlight from its surface, and its sails seemed to be cut from the very fabric of the night sky. "A ship of the Watchers," breathed Daron, his face pale with recognition. "They have already begun their probing. That vessel exists partly in our world and partly in the void beyond creation. It tests our defenses, searching for weaknesses." Even as they watched, the strange ship began to fade, becoming translucent and then invisible. Yet its presence could still be felt, a cold wrongness that made the very air around the harbor feel hostile to life. "We must reach Rivendell with all speed," said Eladan urgently. "If the Watchers are already sending scouts into our world, then we have even less time than we thought." They departed the Grey Havens that very hour, riding swift horses that Círdan provided from his stables. Behind them, Alcarinque was hidden in a secret cove, warded with the strongest protections the shipwright could weave. She would be needed again before their mission was complete. As they rode eastward through the night, the sky above them continued to change and shift. New constellations appeared where none had been before, and the familiar stars seemed to flicker and dance as though uncertain of their position. The very air hummed with tension, and more than once they saw lights moving in the distance, not the friendly fires of mortal settlements, but cold radiances that had no place in the natural world. "How goes it in your heart, Daron?" asked Elrohir, as they paused to rest their horses beside a stream that glowed faintly with its own light. "Do you feel the pull of the old madness?" The minstrel considered the question carefully before answering. "I feel clarity," he said at last. "The corruption that clouded my judgment has been burned away by the pure notes of the last song. Yet I also feel the weight of responsibility more keenly than ever before. If I should fail again, if I should give in to obsession or despair, the consequences would be beyond imagining." "Then do not fail," said Eladan simply. "We are all that stands between creation and the void. There is no room for weakness or doubt." They rode on through the remainder of the night, and as dawn broke gray and uncertain over the land, they saw before them the familiar valley of Rivendell. Yet even here, changes were evident. The gardens bloomed with impossible vigor, flowers of Valinor growing beside the native plants of Middle-earth. The very air shimmered with half-seen vision, as though the barriers between what was and what might be had grown thin. In the courtyard of the last homely house, they found they were not the first to arrive. Legolas of the woodland realm stood beside the fountain, his keen eyes scanning the sky for signs of trouble. Gimli the dwarf sat upon a stone bench, his axe across his knees, and his face set in grim determination. And there were others, men of Gondor and Rohan, a delegation of hobbits from the Shire, even a few of the Beornings from the Vales of Anduin. "Welcome home," said a familiar voice, and they turned to see Galadhil, the lore master, ancient beyond measure, yet somehow renewed by the changes that had come to the world. "The council you called has already begun to gather, but I fear the news they bring is darker than any we had dared to imagine." As they entered the halls of Rivendell, the sons of Elrond felt the weight of destiny settling upon them once more. The time for preparation was nearly at an end. Soon they would face their greatest test, not against a corrupted elf lord driven by grief, but against forces that existed beyond the very concept of good and evil. The last battle for the soul of creation was about to begin. In the great hall of Rivendell, beneath the silver lamps that had burned since the elder days, representatives of all the free peoples of Middle-earth gathered in council, as they had not done since the days of Gil-galad and Elendil. Yet this assembly dwarfed even that mighty gathering, for the peril they faced threatened not just Middle-earth, but all of creation itself. At the head of the hall sat the sons of Elrond, their faces bearing the weight of the terrible knowledge they carried. To their right sat Legolas, representing the woodland realm, and beside him Gimli, speaking for the dwarves of Erebor and the Iron Hills. Representatives of Gondor and Rohan sat together, their old alliance stronger than ever in the face of cosmic peril. From the Shire had come Peregrine Took, now the Thane of his people, his hobbit wisdom tempered by the great deeds of his youth. The Beornings were represented by Grimbeorn the Old, son of Beorn, his massive frame a reminder of the wild strength that still existed in Middle-earth. Even the Rangers of the North had sent their leaders, grim men who watched the borders and knew better than most the signs of approaching doom. But strangest of all were the new arrival, beings that had not been seen in Middle-earth for ages uncounted. The Eagles had come down from their eyries in the misty mountain, led by Gwaihir, the Wind Lord himself. Even more remarkable, a delegation of Ents had emerged from Fangorn Forest, led by Treebeard himself, their slow speech quickened by the urgency of the time. "Whom? Home!" rumbled the eldest of the Ents, his bark-like skin creaking as he settled his massive form in the hall. "Strange days these are, when the very roots of the world grow restless. The trees speak of wrongness in the deep places, of things that should not be stirring in their sleep." Elladan rose from his seat, feeling the eyes of all assembled upon him. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "we have called this council because creation itself stands in peril. What we face is not an enemy that can be defeated by sword or bow, but a force that seeks to remake the very nature of existence." He told them then of the Watchers beyond, beings that had existed before creation, who sought now to enter the world and transform it, according to their alien nature. He spoke of the weakening barriers between the world, of the signs and portents that had been seen across Middle-earth. "How do we fight such foes?" asked Gimli bluntly. "My axe has served me well against orc and troll, but what use is it against beings that exist outside creation itself?" It was Darin who answered, rising slowly from where he sat, apart from the others. Many in the hall had gasped when the minstrel first appeared, for his reputation had spread far in the dark days when his corrupted song had threatened the world. "Master Dwarf," said Darin with humble courtesy, "your axe may be more useful than you know. The Watchers beyond, for all their power, have one crucial weakness. They do not understand creation as we do. They know it only from the outside, as observer. To truly enter our world, they must anchor themselves to something that already exists within it." "The weak points," breathed Legolas, understanding dawning in his keen eye. "The places where the song of creation was damaged by ancient evil." "Precisely," confirmed Darin. "They cannot simply appear anywhere they choose. They must manifest at these nexus points, these scars upon the world. And once they do so, they will be temporarily vulnerable, bound by the same laws that govern all beings within creation." Elladan unrolled the charts that Círdan had shown them, spreading them across the great table so all could see. "These are the danger points," he said, indicating the dark nodes scattered across the map, 7 in total, corresponding to the 7 greatest wounds ever inflicted upon Arda. Peregrine Took leaned forward, studying the map with the sharp intelligence that lay beneath his hobbit exterior. "One in the far north, where Angband once stood. Another at Mount Doom, though that surprises me, given how it was cleansed by the ring's destruction. A third in the Grey Mountain, where the dragons once nested. And here." His finger traced the remaining points. "The ruins of Isengard, the battlefield of Dagorlad, the depths of Moria, where the Balrog slept. And what is this 7th point? It appears to lie in the heart of Rohan. The paths of the dead," said one of the Gondorian representatives grimly, "where the Oathbreakers were bound for so many years. Even after their release, that place remains touched by the weight of ancient curse." Treebeard's deep voice rumbled through the hall. Whom? Yes, 7 wounds, 7 gates for the enemy to enter. But how do we guard them all? The distances are vast, and our people are few compared to the magnitude of the task. We cannot guard them all directly, admitted Elrohir, but we can prepare for what is to come. At each nexus point, we must station those with the power to recognize when the Watchers begin their manifestation, and we must be ready to respond with overwhelming force when they do. Gwaihir the Wind Lord spoke then, his voice like the cry of wind through mountain peaks. The eagles will serve as messengers, carrying word swiftly between the Watchers. No earthbound signal could match our speed in the air. And my people will tend the ancient trees that grow near these cursed places, added Treebeard. The roots of the old forest remember much, and they will give warning when wrongness stirs in the deep places. The council continued through many hours, as strategies were debated and preparations planned. It was agreed that small groups of the most skilled warriors and wise folk would be stationed near each nexus point, ready to respond when the Watchers made their attempt to enter creation. But what of the last song? Asked Legolas. Surely that must play a part in our defense? Elladan and Elrohir exchanged glances, the weight of their terrible knowledge heavy upon them. The last song is our weapon of final resort, said Elladan carefully. If all else fails, if the Watchers succeed in establishing a foothold in creation, then we may have no choice but to sing it again. But to do so would be incredibly dangerous. Reality is still settling from the changes wrought by our first performance. What would happen if you sang it again so soon? Asked Gimli. We do not know, admitted Elrohir. It might successfully banish the Watchers back to the void, or it might complete the work they seek to accomplish, unmaking creation entirely. It is a risk we dare not take unless all hope is lost. Daron spoke again, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. There is another possibility, he said slowly. The last song was designed to remake the music of creation, but perhaps it could be modified, adapted. Instead of remaking all of creation, it might be possible to sing a version that affects only the nexus points themselves, sealing them permanently against intrusion from beyond. But that would require... Elladan's voice trailed off as the implications struck him. Yes, confirmed Daron grimly. It would require someone to stand at each nexus point as the song is performed, to serve as a focus for its power, and the strain of channeling such force through a mortal or even immortal form. He shrugged eloquently. The silence that followed was profound, as all assembled understood what Daron was suggesting. To serve as a focus for the modified last song would almost certainly mean death. Not just death of the body, but the dissolution of the soul itself. 7 volunteers, said Peregrine quietly. 7 heroes willing to sacrifice everything to save creation. I will take the northernmost point, said Legolas without hesitation. Angband lies closest to my father's realm, and I know those lands well. And I will guard Mount Doom, declared Gimli. My people owe a debt to that mountain for all the suffering it caused in the hands of the enemy. One by one, others stepped forward to accept the terrible responsibility. Grimbeorn claimed the Grey Mountain, his wild strength suited to that desolate region. The Rangers of the North chose Isengard as their charge. The men of Gondor took responsibility for Dagorlad, where their ancestors had fought and died. That leaves Moria and the paths of the dead, said Elladan. I will take Moria, said Daron quietly. It is fitting, perhaps, that one who once sought to corrupt the song should give his life to preserve it. All eyes turned to the final nexus point, the paths of the dead, in the heart of Rohan. It was Treebeard who spoke at last, his slow words carrying the weight of millennia. Hum, that cursed place lies near my forest. I will guard it, though it means leaving the trees I have tended for so many years. Better that one old ent should pass, than that all the forests of the world should be remade into something alien and wrong. And so the terrible compact was made. 7 guardians, 7 focal points, 7 lives offered in sacrifice to preserve all of creation. The weight of what they planned settled upon the council like a shroud, yet all knew there was no other choice. As the assembly began to disperse to make their preparations, Eladan called out one final time, "How long do we have?" It was Galathil who answered, his ancient eyes holding visions of the future. "The signs point to the new moon," he said solemnly. 7 days hence, when the sky is darkest and the barriers between worlds grow thin, that is when the Watchers will make their attempt. 7 days to save creation itself. As the representatives of the Free Peoples departed Rivendell to take up their desperate vigil, each carried with them the knowledge that they might be living through the final week of the world as they knew it. The die was cast, the last alliance was formed. Now all that remained was to face the ultimate test and hope that their courage and sacrifice would be enough to preserve the beauty and wonder of Eru's creation. 7 days passed like the beating of a great heart, each dawn bringing the world closer to its moment of ultimate peril. Across Middle-earth, the chosen guardians took their positions at the nexus points, each accompanied by small bands of the bravest warriors their people could provide. Yet all knew that when the final moment came, each guardian would stand alone against forces beyond mortal comprehension. At Rivendell, the sons of Elrond made their final preparations. In the hidden chamber beneath the House of Elrond, they practiced the modified last song that Darin had helped them compose, a version that would focus its power through the 7 guardians rather than reshaping all of creation. The music was beautiful beyond description, yet terrible in its implications, for each note they sang would draw life from those who served as focal points. "Are you certain this will work?" asked Elrohir as they completed another practice session, their voices still echoing in the crystal-lined chamber. Darin, who had remained at Rivendell to help perfect the modified song, set down his harp with trembling hands. "As certain as one can be when venturing into realms of power that few have ever explored," he replied. "The mathematics of the music are sound, but the variable," he shrugged eloquently. "The risk is acceptable," said Eladan firmly, "for the alternative is the transformation of all creation into something utterly alien. Better to attempt this and fail than to do nothing and guarantee defeat." On the 7th evening, as the last light faded from the western sky, the signs began to manifest. Across Middle-earth, the aurora that had been growing stronger each night suddenly blazed with impossible colors, hues that had no names in any tongue, patterns that hurt the mind to contemplate. The very air grew thick and oppressive, as though the world itself held its breath. At each nexus point, the guardians felt the change. In the ruins of Angband, Legolas stood upon a promontory of black stone, his keen elven senses detecting wrongness stirring in the depths below. At Mount Doom, Gimli gripped his axe and watched as the mountain began to glow with an inner light that was not fire. In the Grey Mountains, Grimbeorn felt his bare nature respond to ancient terrors awakening in the deep places. "It begins," whispered Galathil in Rivendell, his ancient eyes reflecting visions of cosmic forces in motion. "The Watchers beyond have found their anchor points. They begin to manifest." Through the Palantir that had been brought from Minas Tirith, the sons of Elrond watched as reports came in from across Middle-earth. At Isengard, the Rangers sent word that the ruined tower had begun to rebuild itself, not with stone and mortar, but with materials that existed only partially in their reality. At Dagorlad, the men of Gondor reported that the marshes of the dead had begun to boil with substances that were neither water nor mud, but something altogether more alien. Most disturbing of all was the report from Moria, where Daron had taken his position in the Chamber of Echoes. Through his connection to the song, the brothers could sense his growing alarm as things that defied description began to seep through the crack in reality itself. "The time has come," declared Eladan, rising from his seat before the Palantir. "We must begin the modified last song before the Watchers complete their manifestation." The brothers took their positions in the chamber, with Galathil and several other lore masters forming a circle around them. Each held one of the 3 fragments of the original last song, and as they began to sing, the crystals blazed with inner light that seemed to pierce through the very walls of reality. The modified song was unlike anything that had ever been sung in Middle-earth, where the original last song had contained the power to remake all of creation. This version focused that same cosmic force through 7 specific points, creating a network of unbreakable barriers that would seal the nexus points forever. As their voices rose in harmonies that echoed the music of creation itself, the guardians across Middle-earth felt the power flowing through them. It was overwhelming, like trying to contain the force of a mountain waterfall in a single cup. Yet each held firm, knowing that the fate of all creation depended upon their sacrifice. Legolas, standing in the ruins of Angband, felt his immortal form begin to dissolve as cosmic forces flowed through him. Yet, with his last strength, he wove the power into barriers of starlight that sealed the ancient fortress forever against intrusion from beyond. As his spirit passed into the song itself, he smiled, knowing that his father's realm would be safe. Gimli, his dwarven constitution proving stronger than expected, held the focus at Mount Doom for long minutes as reality warped around him. Through his sacrifice, the mountain was transformed, no longer a peak of fire and doom, but a beacon of protection that would guard Middle-earth for all ages to come. His final thought was of his friendship with Legolas, and somehow, in the cosmic harmony of the song, he felt his friend's presence beside him. One by one, the other guardians made their sacrifices. Grimbeorn roared defiance at the alien shapes that sought to pour through the Grey Mountain, his bear strength channeling the song's power until the very peaks themselves became guardians against the void. The Rangers of the North died as they had lived, silently and with grim determination, sealing Isengard with walls of song that would endure until the end of time. The men of Gondor at Dagorlad sang the ancient songs of their people as they gave their lives to cleanse the marshlands forever, transforming the realm of the dead into a garden of remembrance where heroes of all ages would be honored. And in the paths of the dead, Treebeard's deep voice joined the harmony. His sacrifice causing great trees to spring up from the cursed ground, an eternal forest that would guard the passage between worlds. But it was Daren's sacrifice that proved most crucial. In the depths of Moria, surrounded by horrors that sought to pour through from beyond creation, the minstrel who had once sought to corrupt the song now sang its purest form. His voice, trained by millennia of practice, held the focus longer than any of the others, giving the sons of Elrond time to weave the final harmonies that would complete their work. As Daren's life force flowed into the song, he felt a moment of perfect peace. The grief and obsession that had driven him to madness were washed away, replaced by understanding of the true nature of love, not the selfish desire to possess what was lost, but the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect what remained. In Rivendell, the brothers felt each sacrifice as a physical blow, yet they continued to sing despite their anguish. The modified last song reached its crescendo, and reality itself seemed to ring like a struck bell. Across Middle-earth, the manifestations of the Watchers Beyond suddenly ceased, their anchor points sealed beyond any possibility of reopening. For a moment that lasted an eternity, silence fell upon the world. Then, slowly, a new music began. Not the artificial silence that Daren had once created, but the natural harmony of a world at peace. Birds began to sing again, rivers resumed their ancient songs, and in the deep places of the earth, the very stones hummed with contentment. Yet the greatest change was in the sky above. The alien aurora faded, replaced by stars that burned with familiar light. And there, rising in the west, like a second dawn, was the glow of Valinor, no longer hidden beyond the circles of the world, but visible to all who had eyes to see. "It is finished," whispered Elladan, his voice hoarse from the mighty song. "The barriers are sealed, and the undying lands return to the site of Middle-earth." In the days that followed, the true scope of what had been accomplished became clear. The 7 nexus points had been transformed from wounds in reality into focal points of power that strengthened rather than weakened the world. And the sacrifice of the seven guardians had not been in vain. Their spirits lived on in the song itself, becoming eternal protectors of creation. More wondrous still was the reunification of the world. Ships began to sail again between Middle-earth and Valinor, carrying not just the Eldar, but all who sought wisdom and peace in the undying land. The age of separation was ended, and the world was whole once more. Yet perhaps the most beautiful change was in the music itself. Where once the song of creation had been marred by discord and corruption, now it rang clear and pure. The children of Eru, elves and men, dwarves and hobbits, all the speaking peoples of Middle-earth, found themselves singing together in harmonies they had never known they possessed. In Rivendell, as the sons of Elrond stood in their father's garden and watched ships of light sail between the earthly realm and the undying lands, they felt a deep satisfaction in their work. They had preserved not just their world, but all of creation, ensuring that the beauty and wonder of Eru's design would endure for all ages to come. "What now, brother?" asked Elrohir, as they watched the last light of evening fade into the gentle glow of Valinor. "Now we rest," replied Elladan. "We have earned it, I think. Let others take up the work of building the new world that our sacrifice has made possible." And so ended the tale of the last song of Valinor, not in darkness and ending, but in new beginning and eternal hope. The sons of Elrond had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious, proving that even in the darkest hour, the music of creation could not be silenced by those who sought to remake it their own image. In the years that followed, when bards sang of their deeds, they would tell of 7 heroes who gave their lives to save creation, and of 2 brothers who bore the burden of cosmic responsibility with grace and wisdom. But most of all, they would sing of the lesson learned in that final hour, that the greatest power is not in domination or control, but in sacrifice made freely for the love of all that lives. The last song had been sung, and creation endured, stronger and more beautiful than ever before.